Auto Club Speedway has sold off a lot of land, confirming they will be a 2/3 mile racetrack. Ricky Santos Jr. could have went to Suros Racing in 2023, and Kyle Busch picks up his first win with Richards Racing, and a lot of drivers react to it. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories to discuss here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Spire Sports Entertainment. As reported by Adam Stern on Friday evening, that Spire Sports Entertainment is exiting the driver representation business to focus on its own properties like Spire Motorsports, as it has spun off its existing driver business and has been rebranded to Motorsports Management International. Not a major shock about this. I think the Spire Motorsports really wants to focus on their own NASCAR Cup Series team. And if you look at their Cup Series team this year, they ran extremely well this past weekend at Auto Club with Corey LaJoie, who ran in the top 15 all day long. So I think they want to really focus on making their team as good as they can, which makes a lot of sense, and it makes a ton of sense that they've decided to do that. And I think that the team could improve a lot this year with them focusing more on their Cup Series team and maybe their Truck Series team at the same time as well. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about IndyCar. As it was announced on Friday that IndyCar will introduce a new alternate oval tires for oval races starting in 2023. This is really great to see. IndyCar, of course, does have alternate tires that they use for the road courses and the street course races, which will be a green tire this year. Now there's going to be alternate tires, which is really good. It will change up some strategies, and I think it'll make the IndyCar racing on the oval tracks a lot better this year. I think this is a really awesome, a really great move for IndyCar to do, and I'm really extremely happy about this overall for sure. And now we're going ahead and on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Auto Club. Now, we're going to be talking about Auto Club quite a bit in today's episode, but it was announced before the race began yesterday that Auto Club sold out. This is already the second sellout of the year so far. The Daytona 500 already sold out earlier this year, and now you've got Auto Club selling out for the second week in a row. Now, I'll be honest, the grandstands did not look completely full, but I do have to imagine with the cooler temperature stuff, and I think don't think as many people really showed up to the racetrack. That being said, they're really great for the track, and obviously the Auto Club Speedway did end up selling out, though it did not completely look like it. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Joe Nemechek. Now, I'm not sure what type of race Joe Nemechek was competing in, but Joe Nemechek won in a Mike Skinner truck this past weekend, as reported by Arkansas and Park Cars, Colby Evans. Really awesome to see that Joe Nemechek won that. Glad to see that Joe Nemechek won. Of course, his son, John Hunter, won the final race at Auto Club this past weekend. So a great weekend overall for the Nemechek family. So congratulations to Joe Nemechek on picking up that victory. Really exciting stuff overall. I'm very happy to see that Joe Nemechek got that victory. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bristol Dirt. As Bristol Dirt is officially ready to go, and they are set for the NASCAR Cup Series race happening on Easter. The Bristol Dirt race, I believe, is in late March and early April this year, so we're not too far away from the Bristol Dirt race happening. We're about a month away from that happening at this point, and it is already looking ready to go. The track looks awesome. It's very exciting that the race is there. I know a lot of people aren't as excited that there is going to be racing on the dirt track, and people wish they weren't racing dirt on Bristol and it was at a different track. But honestly, I have been a fan of Bristol Dirt. I think it put on a really great show last year, and overall, I thought it was a really good race last year, and I'm excited to see that the race is ready to go. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Joseph Wrigley reported, and it was confirmed by multiple reporters yesterday, that Kyle Busch has now the record for the most consecutive seasons of winning a NASCAR Cup Series race. This is the 19th year in a row that Kyle Busch has won, breaking a record that Richard Petty held. He was actually tied with Richard Petty with 18 years. Now Kyle Busch holds the record. To see Kyle Busch already win with Richards Racing is absolutely incredible, and to see him break that record is also very exciting at the same time as well. So, massive congratulations to Kyle Busch on picking up the victory, and glad to see that Kyle Busch has broken a record in the NASCAR Cup Series. Really awesome and very exciting stuff that Kyle Busch has gone on and broken that record, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Robbie Gordon. Now, Mark Martin put up a tweet last night showing that Robbie Gordon was actually with Mark Martin at Auto Club Speedway. Really awesome to see Robbie Gordon basically spotted around NASCAR. I know Robbie Gordon doesn't have the greatest relationship with NASCAR. If you go back through history, go back through Montreal in 2007, you probably could understand why. But Robbie Gordon, a legend of racing in general, has competed in everything, has won a lot of stuff, and to see Robbie Gordon come back and show up in Auto Club, I think a lot of it was to support Sheldon Creed, because Sheldon Creed has been a driver in his Super Truck Series in the past. I think it's awesome to see that Robbie Gordon showed up. Really great to see that he's showing up at the racetrack as whole, and I think it's very fun to see that he was able to come out. So really awesome to see Robbie Gordon at the racetrack, and hopefully maybe in the future he can come back to NASCAR, because I'll be honest, I miss seeing Robbie Gordon at the racetrack, and maybe in the future we'll see him come back. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the SRX. As Matt Weaver reported on Friday evening that there are going to be no local ringers in the SRX in 2023. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm kind of conflicted on this one. On one hand, I understand why there are going to be no local ringers at the racetrack. I think they're focused on getting all the big stars out to the racetracks this year. And with them being on Thursday nights, a lot more Cup drivers and other drivers from different series are going to have more open time and more open opportunities to go out and run in those series. So they're going to have an opportunity to go and run the SRX. On the other hand, though, I really love that factor of the local ringer scene. You got some really awesome drivers that came out. Bubba Pollard showed up. I think Matt Hirschman competed in the SRX last year, if I'm not mistaken. And other drivers got a really cool opportunity who won those races at those tracks, got an opportunity to be the local ringer. I mean, look at, I think it was Doug Coby got an opportunity. He got an opportunity in Trucks later that year as well when he raced. So, in my opinion, I think this is a really fortunate there are not going to be any local ringers this year, but I completely understand why there are going to be no local ringers, because they want to focus on getting the big names. It makes a lot of sense, but it also is a little frustrating that there'll be no local ringers in 2023, to be honest with you. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, before the race at Auto Club, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. spoke to the media, and he says he needs to basically average about a 15th place today so that he would be basically safe in case of more winners this year. Now, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., of course, won the Daytona 500 last week. He'll be looking to win more races and look to be more competitive this year. He did have a very strong run at Auto Club. He ran, I think, top 15, was in top 10 quite a bit. So I'm wondering if JTG Doherty Racing in general is going to be a much faster organization this year, because they do have Mike Kelly coming on and being a crew chief. But they're going to need to have a lot of good runs, because we've already had 2 winners now, and Kyle Busch is ahead of him in the points currently at the moment. So I think Stenhouse needs to run as well as he can. I think if he can do that, I think Stenhouse could be an underdog to make the playoffs. Granted, he's at this moment in the playoffs, but I think we're going to get a lot of winners this year. I think we're going to get around 20 winners overall by the end of this year, and I think we'll get a new winner this week as well. Maybe we'll talk about that later this week in the race picks, but Ricky Stenhouse Jr. needs to focus on performing as well as he can, and if he can do that, I think he's going to have a really good chance of being extremely competitive this year. So Stenhouse needs to run as well as he can, and hopefully he can do that throughout this year. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ty Gibbs. Now, Ozzy Ganesi from Sportsnet put out an article talking about Ty Gibbs. And Ty Gibbs is actually being mentored by a driver in the Cup Series. That driver is Kurt Busch. Now, Kurt Busch, there's a lot of talk about his future maybe coming back. Well, let's talk about Kurt Busch being a mentor. Kurt Busch being a mentor to Ty Gibbs makes a lot of sense in my opinion, because when Kurt Busch was a young driver, Kurt Busch was a very hot-headed driver. And now over the years, Kurt Busch has become a much calmer driver. And I think having Kurt Busch now come in and be a mentor makes a lot of sense and a ton of sense to help Ty Gibbs out. And I think that is going to really help Ty Gibbs out, having a guy like Kurt Busch, who's been around for many, many years, a NASCAR Cup Series champion. It makes a lot of sense to have a guy who's had temper in the past come in and really help Ty Gibbs out. And because I think Ty Gibbs needs that help and needs that guidance. So overall, I'm very happy to see that Kurt Busch is doing that. I think it's really exciting stuff overall for sure that he's going to mentor him, which I think in general, it really overall is going to help Ty Gibbs out in a pretty massive and a major, major way. To be honest with you, I think it's really going to help out him this year in a pretty massive way, to be honest with you. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Fox Sports. Now, Mike Joy put out a tweet on Friday evening and talked about how many full-screen commercials there were and side-by-side commercials there were. And Mike Joy says that Fox showed all 67 green flag lights at the end of the race, with the two side-by-sides. I'm not entirely sure if that's true. I trust Mike Joy, but I'm not entirely sure if that's true. But that's not the only thing. And I appreciate Mike Joy on one thing, that he's being very outspoken and basically talking about this stuff. And I appreciate Mike Joy being the one open up and speaking about it. Because let's be honest, the Daytona 500 coverage this year was not very good. And I want to say one thing to the Fox coverage and talk about that and transition to that for a second. The Fox coverage yesterday was not great either. I will say that there were less full-screen commercials, admittingly, but there should have been about that many full-screen commercials altogether. I think there were about 8 or 9 full-screen commercials, or maybe 10 at the most, which is still a lot, but it's better than the Daytona 500. However, the presentation and the broadcast was completely dead yesterday. It was really, really just boring, like conversation and casual, and it's like they were off, and they weren't doing a great job with the coverage, and I just felt like the commentary was dead in the booth. Camera shots were terrible. They weren't focused completely on the racing throughout. It was just kind of frustrating to watch as a fan, and in my opinion, when I watch a broadcast, I want to watch the best broadcast out there. And when I watched the race yesterday, admittingly, it was very frustrating to watch. So it sucks how the broadcast kind of, happened, It really sucks. Hopefully they can fix it. I appreciate Mike Joy being open and outspoken, but I am already ready for NBC at this point, and we're only 2 races in. So it is what it is overall. It sucks what's happened, but it is what it is, and hopefully they can get this situation figured out, and Fox can do a better job at Vegas. I'm worried about this week, though, and next week, because Danica Patrick's in the booth for the next 2 weeks. So I'm worried that the broadcast is not going to be good, and I think it's probably going to be pretty bad this weekend overall, to be honest with you, and probably next weekend as well. It's probably going to be very, very bad. And now we're going to on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Mason Maggio. As it was announced on Friday morning that Mason Maggio will make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut this weekend at Las Vegas, driving the number 66 for NBM Motorsports. Mason Maggio is a talented up-and-coming talent who is only 18 years old currently at the moment, who was at one point a Ricker Racing development driver when they actually had a development program in the late model series. And Mason Maggio had been extremely competitive in late models. He also made select truck series starts last year in a 33 for the Ram Brothers Racing, and now gets an opportunity to compete in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Like I mentioned and said already, I think Mason Maggio is a very talented driver, and I could see him getting the best out of his equipment. I think the NBM had a decent run. They were pretty fast in the Xfinity Series race, especially, and I thought they had was overall a really good race from them overall. So happy to see Mason Maggio getting the opportunity. Like I said, I think he's going to for sure get the best out of the equipment, and I think Mason Maggio has a very strong run in his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. I think he does a really good job. I think he's going to be extremely competitive, and I expect Mason Maggio to have a pretty good run, maybe a top 20 or top 25 in his debut. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kaz Grala. As it was announced on Friday early afternoon that Kaz Grala is going to drive the one truck for Tricon Garage this weekend at Las Vegas. This is a fantastic opportunity for Kaz Grala. And a lot of people are thinking, well, why is it a fantastic opportunity? Well, Tricon Garage is basically about all the stuff from KBM, and I expect that they are going to be extremely competitive this year in the truck series. This one truck was also very strong in the truck race and truck qualifying as well. Plus, Kaz Grala can always get the best out of the equipment, so I think he is for sure going to get the best out of that equipment this weekend at Las Vegas. I think he's going to run extremely well with the Tricon Garage group, and I think he gets the best out of the equipment. I think he will be competing for the overall victory, at least for sure, maybe a top 10, but I think he will be competing for the victory overall at the end. So I expect him to run very, very good. I think he's going to be very, very competitive, and overall, I think this is a very awesome and a very great opportunity for him going into this weekend. I think he has a great run and will run up front this weekend with Tricon Garage in the Truck Series race at Las Vegas, and maybe we'll see him get more opportunities if he runs well enough with the team. This is the best opportunity he's had in a while. I know Sam Hunt Racing is a good team, but he's also got a great opportunity in the Truck Series, and maybe he gets a second career Truck Series victory this weekend at Las Vegas. I think he'll be an underdog for the race, and I think he will be a threat also for the victory as well. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about F1. As there's been a lot of talk and conversation about Andretti over the last few months. Andretti, of course, is trying to get into Formula One, and they're trying to bring a new manufacturing, and that is Cadillac. The F1 teams don't want that. And apparently, according to reports on motorsports.com and Adam Stern, teams are trying to increase the Andretti fee from $200 million to $600 million. Here's the thing. The F1 teams are badly not wanting Andretti in, and I don't understand why they don't want him in. And I think a lot of it is due to the Americanization. They want American dollars. They don't want American teams or American drivers. If Formula One is going to get a growth in the United States, you have to accept them in Formula One, in my opinion. The only way that Formula One will grow, and they're trying to get a reach in the United States, but the only way, like I said, in my opinion, that you're going to get them in is you got to get them in is basically bringing new manufacturing, which are bringing new manufacturing, and obviously, of course, that. And the Concord Agreement states that they can have up to 13 teams. And they'll probably accept some of those backmarker teams and such, like some Indian teams and such, but they're not going to basically, like the Mahindra team, I think there was a team that was rumored, if I'm not mistaken, that could have come in, but they won't accept an American team. And it's just frustrating to see that they are against it. I don't understand why they're against it. You have Andretti who's bringing in sponsorship money. They clearly want to come in, and they clearly want to race. And the fact that they're trying to deny it is absolutely frustrating and absolutely absurd as a fan, because if they were true things, they would want him in. But they don't want him in because they don't want Americanization for whatever reason. It's just frustrating, and it sucks that this is what's going on. But it is what it is, and overall, it just sucks that this is what's going on with F1. And the fact they're not accepting it is definitely a little bit frustrating overall, for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we're going to be talking about Kyle Busch a lot in this episode, but the first story revolves around the t-shirt that Kyle Busch made. And Kyle Busch is going to be running the triple header at Las Vegas. He will be the only one, from what I understand, that is running the truck race, the Xfinity Series race, and the Cup Series race this weekend. Kyle Busch, of course, will drive the 51 truck for his own organization, the first of 5 starts, with Zera transporting on the truck. The second race, he's going to run the Xfinity Series race. He will drive the 10 for Kaulig Racing with Le Golf sponsorship. And then finally, the third race, which is Las Vegas for the Cup race, I'm not sure what the sponsor would be. Maybe Alsco Uniforms will be the sponsor, considering when they put the initial thing out, it had basically the Las Vegas racetrack when it was there. Kyle Busch, I think, has got a really good chance to potentially sweep the weekend overall. I think he's going to easily win 2 of the 3 races this weekend. I'm not saying which ones. You'll have to watch my preview videos and prediction videos on which races I think he's going to win. But I think Kyle Busch is going to be extremely fast and extremely competitive, and he's hungry. He's got a lot of wins coming, in my opinion. I think he's going to a lot of races in all the series this year. I think it'll be his most winningest year in a very, very long time, and I think Kyle Busch is going to be very fast and extremely competitive. So really exciting stuff overall, and I'm looking forward to see that Kyle Busch will compete in the triple header this upcoming weekend, to be honest with you. Really excited about that overall for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about 23XI Racing. And it was reported on Friday by Adam Stern that 23XI Racing has around $30 million in sponsor revenue for this year. A fairly impressive haul for a third-year NASCAR team. This is really, really impressive stuff like they mentioned. They've got a lot of sponsorship funding coming in. Monster Energy's upgraded their sponsorship this year. McDonald's is paying a lot of money this year. Of course, the Jordan brand is likely going to sponsor. We don't know which races they're going to sponsor this year. Sirius XM is going to sponsor Tyler Reddick. Xfinity just came on as a partner for 23XI, and a lot of it has to do with them being a new age organization. But also a lot of it has to do with Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick. They both bring a lot of sponsorship and funding to the organization, and the fact that they're already picking up a lot of sponsorship funding for both drivers is really exciting stuff. And the fact that they've got $30 million in that revenue, which I think might be the best of every team, maybe outside of Hendrick Motorsports or maybe even Trackhouse Racing. But for them to already have $30 million coming in of sponsorship revenue in just their third year as an organization is absolutely amazing and absolutely incredible stuff. So that is absolutely awesome in my opinion. I'm very happy about that, and I'm glad to see that they've got a lot more sponsorship revenue coming in for Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace. So awesome stuff. Really great to see, and happy to see that they were able to get a lot of sponsorship for this year. Overall, I think it's big in general for that team, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Busch once again. Now, Kyle Busch basically spoke to Bob Pockrass, spoke to the media after winning the NASCAR Cup Series race at Auto Club. And Bob Pockrass asked a question about what is different at Richard Childress Racing than at Joe Gibbs Racing. And Kyle Busch spoke on that transition and spoke on the struggles at Joe Gibbs Racing last year and transition to Richard Childress Racing. I think a lot of it are a lot of factors into play, and there's no doubt that Kyle Busch struggled in 2022 last year. But let's not forget that before the contract talks really started heating up in June, the week of Worldwide Technology, which is the first NASCAR Cup Series race I went to, Kyle Busch was competing for the win, had one of the fastest cars in that race, and finished second to Joey Logano, and was second in the points, about 9 points behind Chase Elliott. So he was right up there contending for the regular season championship. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was basically the contract talks really started heating up. And you have to remember, too, nationally he was up front in that race, and then he ran into the outside wall and got frustrated. And the contract talks really heated up at one point, and that's a big factor why Kyle Busch struggled at the end of the year. And once Kyle Busch basically confirmed that he would be leaving the team and leaving Joe Gibbs Racing to go to Rich Childress Racing, he really stopped trying, in my opinion. Coming over to Rich Childress Racing, he's hungry this year. He wants to win a lot of races, and I think he's going to be very competitive throughout this year. So, really exciting stuff overall for sure. Sucks that he kind of struggled at the end of last year, but I think this year in 2023, you're going to see a new Kyle Busch. He's fast, he's hungry, and he wants to win a lot of races. And I think he's going to be very, very competitive in the 2023 season overall for sure, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Jenson Button. Now, we talked a little bit about this in the past, but Jenson Button has shown some interest in maybe racing in NASCAR. And Jack Swansea from Front Stretch actually asked Jenson Button about that. And Jenson Button is actually interested in racing in NASCAR. Now, he says he doesn't want to run oval races, but he says he wants to run some road course races. Now, this is not the first time that Jenson Button has admitted this. I believe at the press conference a couple weeks ago at Daytona, he confirmed that he has also shown interest in wanting to run. Now, obviously, a lot of big factors why I think, number one, the big reason is because he's driving a Garage 56 entry. And I think he would love to get a little bit of experience in the NASCAR Cup Series before he transitions over and runs the Garage 56 entry. So who could he run with? Well, I think a big key team that he could run with is the Project 91 car for Trackhouse Racing. Project 91 has indicated that in the next couple weeks they will be announcing who their driver, it will Trackhouse Racing, because that's where Project 91 is. They are interested and they want to bring in some road course guys. They talk maybe run the Daytona 500. They, of course, did not run. They were talking about bringing Julio Castroneves in. They did not end up bringing him in. But I think Jenson Button truly wants to be into this series, and I think he wants to run some races. And I would love for Jenson Button to be in this sport. He's one of the greatest race car drivers ever compete in the world of racing. And in general, I think if whatever team he does go to, whether it's Project 91, drive the Trackhouse car, which of course he is part of the Garage 56 entry, which is the Hendrick car, and I think Trackhouse may have an alliance, maybe with Hendrick Motorsports if I'm not mistaken. If not, it's with RCR, but that is a Chevy team. So if he does get the race, I would have to think that it will be in the Project 91 car. That being said, though, overall, in general, it's really exciting stuff, and we'll see what happens. But overall, a very, very interesting story around Jenson Button. He's interested in racing in NASCAR. I hope he does have an opportunity to maybe race in NASCAR in the foreseeable future, because it would be fun for him to get the opportunity to race in NASCAR. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch once again. Now, basically, Austin Connecting from Sports, I put out an article around Kurt Busch. And there were some questions asked about Kurt Busch and potentially being an owner of 2311 Racing and joining the ownership group. Now, currently at the moment, Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan and maybe Curtis Polk, I believe, are part of that ownership group at 2311 Racing. And with Kurt Busch having a higher up and being the consulting role at 2311 Racing, he was asked if he did want to get an ownership role. Kurt Busch said at this point he wants to remain in the consulting role. So he said, as of now, no, I do not want to become an owner of 2311 Racing. Now, a lot of people are thinking, well, this isn't a shock or surprise. A lot of people like myself maybe thought, maybe Kurt Busch could become an owner of 2311 Racing because of how much power he's gotten at 2311 Racing. But him being part of the consulting role and basically consulting and working and being a coach for Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace and also Ty Gibbs among other drivers in the Cup Series, I think it's been really fun for Kurt Busch. And in general, in my opinion, I think it's good that he wants to stay in that consulting role and wants to focus on that because I think he wants to make all of his drivers that he's working with very, very competitive, especially since 2311 Racing's had some struggles to start the 2023 season, which is something that 2311 Racing really did not want to have this year. But I look at Kurt Busch going into this, and I think it makes a lot of sense for the focus on being more of that consulting role and being there as a guy who's higher up in the team. So I think he's higher up, but he's not like the ownership. And I think he wants to focus on really helping out the drivers at 2311, which you look at the team last year, they ran well, and Kurt Busch coming onto the team has really helped 2311 Racing out. But it does make a lot of sense that at this point that he does not want to focus on being an owner of the team and wants to focus, and of course he's not going to be an owner, but he wants to focus on helping the drivers out at 2311 Racing. Overall, in my opinion, I think it's a good decision for him overall, and I think it's great to see that he showed that he ran really, really great. He's a great driver, one of the greatest ever to race, and it's good that he wants to focus on the ownership side of things at 2311 Racing overall for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we've talked about Kyle Busch a lot in this episode, but a big reason why we're talking a lot about Kyle Busch is because Kyle Busch has already won with Richard Childress Racing. He grabs his first win with Richard Childress Racing, only technically his second points-paying start and his third start with Richard Childress Racing. A lot of drivers have come out to congratulate Kyle Busch on social media. The first one was Kyle Larson, who congratulated him. Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch have a really big respect for each other on the racetrack. Kyle Larson went on social media to congratulate Kyle Busch. Chase Elliott also was asked a question about Kyle Busch, and basically I think he congratulated Kyle Busch as well. But he also said that nobody should be surprised that Kyle Busch ended up winning. And anyone that doesn't know how good a driver Kyle Busch is and doubted Kyle Busch, basically need to check your NASCAR knowledge. And also Kurt Busch as well congratulated Kyle Busch on picking up the victory as well on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on all social media platforms. They congratulated him on picking up the victory there. But also something that was really, really funny is what Kyle Busch said. And they were asked questions about Rowdy Nation and hearing all the cheers on the racetrack. Because if you watched the race after Kyle Busch won, I think that is the most cheers I think Kyle Busch has ever gotten at a race. And Kyle Busch took a bow and he said, Rowdy Nation is growing, bro. Rowdy Nation is growing, which I 100% agree. I know Kyle Busch might be joking a little bit, but I think Rowdy Nation is growing. I think a lot of people saw what happened last year with the contract talks, and now he basically got ousted from Joe Gibbs Racing, and a lot of people want to see Kyle Busch perform. And I'll say this about Kyle Busch winning. I thought Kyle Busch was going to win. I did not think he already would win a race, but you go back to last year's race at Auto Club, and that A car was the fastest car on the racetrack at the end of the race. Unfortunately, he had a tire go down that cost him an opportunity. Kyle Busch took his stuff easy and did a really great job and ran up front. And when you see a guy like Kyle Busch perform as well as Kyle Busch did, he really did a fantastic job and did an amazing job. And I'm very happy to be Kyle. Like I said, I'm very happy to be a Kyle Busch fan. You know, he did an amazing job. I've become a Kyle Busch fan over the years, and to see him win already is great. And like I've already said, I think this is the first of many wins. I would not be surprised by the end of this year if Kyle Busch does win the Cup Championship, because this was overall one of the 2 or 3 fastest cars last year. But I also think Kyle Busch is going to win 5 to 6 races at the end of this year. I think he's going to get the best out of the equipment this year. I think he's going to have a fantastic year overall with Richard Childress Racing. And like I mentioned and already said, I think this is going to be a very, very, very good year for Kyle Busch heading into 2023. We're not surprised if he sweeps the weekend. I think he can win all 3 races. I'm not saying he's going to, because I'm not predicting him to win the Cup race, but I think that you're going to see Kyle Busch run great. I think he's a championship threat already, and I think he's going to win a lot of races this year with Richard Childress Racing and in the other series as well. I think he has a great year. I think he's going to be fast, and to see Kyle Busch already win is phenomenal. It's the first of many in the field. Should be scared. He's dangerous on the track when he's great. When he performs at his best, he always runs well. And Kyle Busch, I think, is going to be very good in 2023 and win quite a few races, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we're talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, something very interesting came about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Obviously, of course, he won the Daytona 500 this year, But Oscar Nensi from Sportsnet and The Athletic actually reported that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. during the offseason had actually had conversations with Stewart-Haas Racing to maybe drive for them in 2023. Now, this is very interesting because Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is represented by Kevin Harvick Incorporated, and also he does have some sponsorship and funding with him, plus he's a dirt driver, and Tony Stewart, who owns the team currently at the moment, is a major dirt guy as well. However, the deal never materialized and it never completely went through. But Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s name has kind of went back in conversations as well to potentially drive for Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. And here is why. One, Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s stock has gone up after winning the Daytona 500. I know that Stenhouse is on a multi-year contract with JTG Daugherty Racing. In June, he signed that multi-year deal. But if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that there's a second option here. So Stenhouse could technically be a free agent at the end of the 2023 season and could potentially go to Stewart-Haas Racing. And Ricky Stenhouse Jr., in my opinion, is not a bad driver. If you gave him an opportunity to drive for a great organization, a fast organization like Stewart-Haas Racing, because this is no disrespect to JTG Daugherty Racing, but they're not the fastest organization as overall. That being said, though, they have had a great start to the year, and this is the best start to the year they've had in a very, very long time. But Ricky Stenhouse Jr., like I mentioned and said, he would be a solid driver to go to SHR. I know a lot of people crap on Stenhouse, but he's overall a pretty talented and a pretty good driver overall. And like I mentioned and said, I think he would be able to run pretty solidly. I'm not saying he would go out and run as good as Kevin Harvick has, but I think he would be decent. I think he'd be a playoff contender, and he's a veteran driver as well. And that's one thing that Stewart-Haas Racing I'm worried about in the future right now is the future of that team is the fact that they won't have a lot of veteran presence. Eric Almirola, this could be his last year. He could come back next year. He's on a multi-year deal, but he basically is 50-50 on if he's coming back next year or not. And then obviously think about Kevin Harvick. This is Kevin Harvick's final year, and you need someone to come in and drive that 4-car. And like I said, I know some people disagree with me on Ricky Stenhouse Jr. being a candidate because you look at Stenhouse, he hasn't done a lot. But Stenhouse is getting to the prime currently. He's picked up his third career victory, and I think his stock has moved up. I think a lot of people are looking at Stenhouse and think that Stenhouse could be a genuine factor in the future if you give him a really great opportunity. So maybe he does become a factor for Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. I don't think he's a favorite right now, but some of the guys who could have gone to Stewart-Haas Racing, guys like Ross Chastain, guys like Alex Bowman at the beginning of the year, because remember, they were on contract years. Those guys are off the table. Maybe Denny Hamlin and Mark Truex Jr. become potential possibilities, but I think they're going to stay with Joe Gibbs Racing potentially at the end of the year. So overall, in my opinion, Stenhouse could become a possible driver. I think there's a good chance he does return to JTG Daugherty next year for 2024. I think they're going to want to keep him, but he could become a potential possibility as a potential driver that could drive for Stewart-Haas Racing next year. Stenhouse could be, so we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to Ricky Stenhouse Jr. if he does decide to go ahead and return to JTG or maybe go to SHR in 2024. Like I said, my prediction currently at the moment right now is I think that he is going to stay with JTG Daugherty Racing going into next year, but we're just going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to Ricky Stenhouse Jr. going into the end of this year, and we'll see what happens for Stenhouse at the end of this season. Now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Auto Club Speedway. There's been a lot of talk about the future of Auto Club Speedway over the last 2 weeks and months, if the track was truly going to be converted from a 2-mile track to a 2/3 mile or a half-mile track. Well, it was officially confirmed this past weekend from court documents that NASCAR sold on major real estate sale of dozens of acres of land on the site of Auto Club Speedway. Now, there's been a lot of updates in regards over the last couple of weeks, but according to reports, the land was sold for over $500,000, that being $544 million. That means that the land has been dropped from about 588 acres, if I'm not mistaken, down to about 98 acres, so nearly 500 acres was cut off. It was also confirmed, like I mentioned, that the track, instead of being a half-mile track, shout out to NASCAR man for this, but basically the track will go from a half-mile track down to a 2/3 mile racetrack. This track is also expected to be a track that's kind of a hybrid of Martinsville and also Bristol Motor Speedway as well. And the plans for the area and the money that they're going to get back is to pay off the ISC debt that they basically need to pay off. They also to reinvest process into the fan experience and get the track amenities up at the racetrack as well. I'm very hit or miss on this situation with Auto Club Speedway. On one hand, with how much money that they're getting back from the land overall, they absolutely need to do it. The fact that they basically got over $500,000 back, it makes a lot of sense why they've gone ahead and done that and sold off the land. It makes a ton of sense. And honestly, a lot of people do want more short tracks on the circuit. Here's the other side of things on where I kind of sit on a little bit as well. I'm definitely very sad that the last true 2-mile race at Auto Club Speedway has happened, because the last year or two of the track's history, especially in 2022 and 2023, the track had very fantastic and great racing. But the attendance wasn't great. I think it was 50,000 people they said showed up to the track, so it wasn't a complete sellout. I know I mentioned that they said it was a complete sellout, but I don't think it was a complete sellout, and I think the cold temperatures did play a role into that. That being said, though, and like I mentioned here, it sucks that this is truly it for Auto Club Speedway. I really am sad that this is it, because Auto Club Speedway's had a lot of great memories. I know the track took a long time for the track to really get going, and that's one thing. If they actually had repaved it and not sold off the land and turned it into a short track, they were going to have to go ahead and repave the track eventually. And while I think the next-gen car have provided great racing, I don't think repaving the track would have provided great racing on the track. The next-gen car, like I said, has provided great racing on the 2-mile track, and even Michigan put on a great show. But this also now means that Michigan Speedway is now the only 2-mile track on the circuit now, so we got to preserve Michigan and keep that going. But also, I am worried about the long-term future, because we know that there's not going to be a race Auto Club in 2024, and it's uncertain if there's even going to be racing in 2025. And with there being residential areas going to be popping up around the track, I am worried about the long-term future of Auto Club. But there's also some positives on this story. If you really look at it, there are positives that at least you will maybe see the race become the season finale. I think that's one of the things that NASCAR wants, is they want to end the season on the West Coast. And I think with them working on Auto Club and converting it to 2/3 mile track, there is a lot of talk about the future of this track and maybe becoming the potential season finale, which honestly, if Auto Club became the season finale, I think that'd be really, really good. And maybe the race will provide great racing, but I think that's a couple things why people are against this move and where I kind of stand on it as well. Number one, the racetrack had provided a lot of great racing and had fantastic racing overall. The other big reason is that the short track package itself that NASCAR's had has not provided a lot of great racing. I know NASCAR over the offseason had made some changes, and next week at Phoenix, there's going to be a 50-minute practice session just to basically do some testing on the short track package. They're going to basically run a 2-inch spoiler. They've got rid of some of the things. They got rid of the engine strake downward. They've done some changes on the engine diffusers and all that stuff to try to make the racing a lot better, hopefully for the short tracks. And drivers did say that the racing did feel a lot better with the 2-inch spoiler when they did go out on the tracks. So the hope is that the racing can be better on the short tracks, and maybe we'll get a good race Auto Club when it does eventually happen. But I am very worried about the long-term future of Auto Club, because I think the short track will happen, but we may not be racing in Southern California again for a long time, because it's going to be a few years, because now we got to think about what's going to happen in the future of that area. I know a lot of people mentioned Irwindale Speedway up, and that was talked about. Maybe we can go to Irwindale Speedway. They could probably bring some facilities in. People really want Irwindale to come on the schedule, so that could be a possible. What about making some changes to the West Coast swing? Moose Sonoma earlier in the year. I would love for that to be early in the season, be part of the West Coast swing, have a road course on the early portion of the year. I know Coda's early in the year as well, but they could end up maybe doing that. That is a potential possibility. And then you think about other possibilities. Rockingham wants to come back. We know that track wants to come back on the circuit. Maybe go there. Who knows at this point what could end up happening, but I really am sad, and it sucks that this is it, but I understand why they're doing it, especially with all the money that they're going to be getting from the renovations and all that kind of stuff. We'll see what happens in long term, how long it'll be, because we know there's not going to be a cup race in 2024 or any racing for that matter. We know there's probably not going to be racing in 2025, because I don't expect that there will be any sort of racing at Auto Club Speedway. In my opinion, I don't think there's going to be any racing Auto Club in 2025 either. I think it's going to take at least 2 years. It's going to take too long for the track to be done. And it's just overall frustrating in a sense that this is going away. But at the same token, same time, I completely understand why they're doing it. But that's truly it for Auto Club, man. The 2-mile track has been around since 1997 after 26 years. Great memories, frustrating beginnings, great ending to the track. Close off with a great sunset with John Hunter Nemechek winning the Xfinity and Kyle Busch winning the final Cup race, getting his 61st victory. It's the end of an era for Auto Club Speedway, the end of the track's long history, and overall, in my opinion, I'm very sad and frustrated about that this is it for it, because it had great racing this weekend, but it is what it is, and now Auto Club moves on to new history and tries to become a short track. So exciting, well, not exciting stuff overall, but it is what it is. And Auto Club Speedway has sold off a lot of its land. So that is for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on, be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below over that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's video. What are thoughts about the thoughts about Auto Club being sold off and a lot of land being sold off? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories discussed here today on the channel, including the interesting stuff around Ricky Stenhouse Jr.? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we should have a couple more videos on the channel. We'll probably have the Xfinity Series race picks and also the entry list for the South Point 400 video. Also, I would expect that the truck race picks video will be coming out later tonight as well. Wednesday, there's going to be the NASCAR news video on the channel, along with maybe the Nat paint scheme video dropping at the end of the day. Thursday is going to be the Cup race picks from Las Vegas, and then Friday will be a NASCAR news video along with the truck review. We got a lot of content on the way for you guys, and I think you should be really excited about that. Also, F1 week season is kicking off as well. Really looking forward to that. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.